Hey, welcome back to the channel. I am Coach Chris McMahon and I'm so excited to have you here. Today's video is going to be all about injuries because right now I am dealing with a pretty gnarly ankle sprain, ligament irritation, and I thought it would be really helpful to talk about that because oftentimes you'll get hurt and not know if you should keep training, not know what you should do with your nutrition, and so I wanted to share a few little tidbits with you. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to show the workout that I do today while paying attention to what's going on with my ankle, and I thought that would be really helpful for you. Before we dive in any further, please make sure that you have notifications turned on, you're subscribed to the channel, you give a thumbs up if you find this helpful, and comment below with any questions because I'm always happy to answer them. Now, first, a little background about what's going on with my ankle. A few weeks ago, we were preparing to move, and I dropped a very heavy box on my foot. I thought nothing of it, other than that it really hurt. The next morning, it was tender to the touch. But again, I thought I had just bruised my foot. I was able to walk. There wasn't a lot of discomfort. I noticed that there was some irritation if I did certain squatting patterns, so I kind of tried to avoid that, and it seemed to be fine. And then this Sunday, I had signed up for a men's two-hand touch football league that required a lot of sprinting, a lot of cutting, and stopping short. And in my training, the type of stuff I do, my body is ready for that, or so I thought. And by the end of the game, my ankles did not feel great. Also because I didn't wear cleats and we were running on a turf field, I probably should have had some sort of cleat on. And by the end of the day, I was basically shuffling around on my butt to get around in my house because I was in so much pain in that ankle. I went to the doctor, did an x-ray, nothing was broken, but there were some inflammation, big strains around the ligaments in my foot, and now I'm in this splint, can't really move it. I would say it's a sprain. Ligaments are kind of tricky because you got to get like an MRI and look at that, but we're just going to assume it's a sprain for now. With some time and attention, I'll be able to rehab it. Nothing new for me. I've had sprains. Clearly, I can't train my lower body, and this is something that will come up for a lot of people. To get an injury, whether it be like a hand injury, shoulder, back, whatever it might be, you'll get some sort of injury and then immediately go, okay, I need to rest my entire body. I can't do any sort of training whatsoever. And depending on the severity of your injury, you might be right? If we have a very serious injury, yeah, rest is very important. However, an ankle sprain, I can still move around. Even if my foot was broken, technically, I'd still be able to move around. Should I be pushing it to 100? No. If it was a broken ankle, no. You need to still be able to recover properly. But in the case of a sprain, I can still train my upper body. I can still work on my hips. I can still work on my opposite foot or opposite side of my body's mobility and strength. There's a lot of different options here. So the number one thing is don't automatically say that you can't train. Of course, you're going to want to follow your doctor's advice. Everyone's going to be different. But the fact of the matter is you can always train around an injury, and you are going to have to listen to your body to know how hard you can actually push it, how far you should take things. But for the most part, I could still crush my upper body and get some great workouts in and still focus on lower body mobility and single leg strength. Those sorts of things are not going to derail my ability to recover whatsoever, and they can actually help with recovery. The other thing you have to think about is when you do have these injuries and it's on one side of your body, the initial thought is, well, I won't train at all. But there's research out there, and maybe I can find the study. If not, you can do some Googling yourself. But there is research out there showing that when you train the opposite limb, the other limb also gets some of those strength benefits, which is important. So if I strength train on my right leg, my left leg will take over some of that strength as well, which is interesting, right? It's so you don't have to think that you're only going to train one side and then you're going to be walking in circles all the time. There's ways to train and still be well balanced. And of course, with injuries, you're going to have to rehab stuff, but it's okay. Someone recovering from surgery or an injury, I really wouldn't recommend being in a calorie deficit, simply because we need those calories to actually heal our body. As in, our body requires energy to build back the tissue, build back the bone. That requires energy, and if we're reducing the amount of energy we have for that activity, well, it's going to slow down your recovery process. So what I would recommend is bringing things up closer to maintenance and practicing being at maintenance while you are recovering from your injury. So I would focus on training and your rehab and focus on getting back to a place where you are comfortable in your body, where you feel like you are able to still make progress. That's one of the big things that people miss out on when it comes to these sorts of injuries and when it comes to weight loss. You have to understand that the body still needs calories for specific tasks. And while a calorie deficit is how you lose weight, if you're in that deficit and your body needs that energy that you are taking away, you're going to run into roadblocks. Now, that's not to say you need to be in a calorie surplus, right? So if you're gaining weight, you're going to be in a surplus. If you're losing weight, you're going to be in a deficit. Maintenance means you're just going to maintain your body weight. And for a lot of people, that's hard to do. Like, it's hard to maintain. That maintenance is such a weird place because you see the scale stay the same or float around the same few pounds, and it can be frustrating. But it's actually really important that you practice being there because remember, the goal isn't to be in a fat loss phase for your entire life. The point is to be able to get to a point where you can maintain your progress. So those are the big things that I think are very important. You can still train, you just work around the injury, and you adjust your nutrition to make sure you have enough energy on board so that you can properly heal. Of course, getting enough sleep, adequate nutrition, making sure you're hydrated, making sure that you are still moving to the best of your abilities, all of those things are going to be a win along the way as you recover from an injury. Now, I'm super stoked to be able to show you some of this workout, and I'm going to be reviewing it. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for being here.
And check through some of these workout videos, take you through what I was going through, what I was working on, why I was doing it, and how I'm basically training around this injury. So the first video we got up is me using club bells. I'm going to fast forward to the part where I'm using it. So here's what I really enjoy about club bells as I watch this right now. It is the ability to flow through the joints. Like, because of the circular motions and because you're using weight, there's momentum behind it. And it's a really nice way to warm up the tissues, get into the joints of the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, even your fingers, which is very helpful if you're doing any sort of pressing movement. I think that's something that can often get overlooked. Now, here I'm using 4-pound club bells, and I start to move a little bit fast, and I realize I'm moving fast and I want to slow down. It's really purposeful movement here. I'm not looking to uh, go so fast that I lose form. That's the last thing we want to do. You really want to make sure that you're holding on to form while doing this. I was gifted these bells back when I first got started as a trainer. I never really used them, and then recently, over the last year or so, I started practicing more with these bells. I would prefer to have like a shorter bell that was a little bit lighter, so I could really just focus on getting every single joint. But these are the 4-pound bells. Nothing too crazy. Again, because of their length, it can make it harder sometimes for me to do more complicated motions. Not that that's really the goal always. So we go through this and it feels pretty good. I switch directions. I make sure to do both sides, different pattern there. Now what we're looking at are what we will call cars or controlled articular rotations. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm holding on to the weight, squeezing as much as I can through those hands, and I have my arms at like this 45-degree angle. What I'm actually doing right now is in essence, I am taking my arms out, I am protracting, I am elevating the scap, then I am retracting, then I am depressing the scap. So I'm getting this circular motion that's loosening up those shoulder blades, which again is pretty important if you're going to be doing any sort of pressing work or any sort of pulling work. So normally I would hang from a pull-up bar and do like a pulling prep or things like that, but I really didn't want to have to jump up onto a bar right now because of my foot. So this is a nice alternative. You could also do the same thing on the ground from all fours. This is a great way to really get that feeling good. Again, do it all in one direction and then do the other direction, and you'll find that there's a huge benefit to this. Then I take things down to the ground. Now, this is something where what I'm doing is normally I would be like in a plank, and from that plank position, I would again do some scap shrugs. I might do some shoulder circles, but here I try to keep it pretty simple because I can't have an anchor point on the ground. I don't have both feet because it really hurts to flex my foot. So I didn't have that plank position, or I wasn't really able to go down into all fours and have that demand there on my ankle. Go into some T-spine rotations. Now again, it's kind of challenging for me right now because that causes the ankle to move a little bit, but Felt okay, so I gave it a go. Reaching through and opening up, I really love this motion, especially because we're going to be pressing again, and the T spine is one of those things that can easily get gunked up. So making sure I have the mobility or the movement through that area of my body before I go into pressing is pretty important. I suggest throwing these into your workout, regardless if you're doing overhead pressing, chest pressing, pulling, any sort of. These are kind of like just general daily movements that you can do that are really helpful and can only benefit you in a strength training scenario. This movement, where I'm in my strength training block, A1 if we want, is an alternating chest press. Now, the thing that's cool about this variation is that while it is alternating, there is an isometric at the bottom. Now, the thing here that will trip up a lot of people is when they come, they would maybe rest the weight on their chest, but that actually defeats the purpose of this movement. What you really want to be focusing on is not resting on the chest. You want to come slightly above and be in your end range of motion. So we're getting that time under tension and you're getting that stretch. That stretch is where we see all the magical stuff happen when we are trying to build muscle. So here, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm going to my end range, which only helps with mobility. We were aiming for about 5 to 6 reps per side. Here I'm using double 24 kilo bells. I don't have dumbbells. I use kettlebells for these things, just what I have available to me. But again, those last few reps were a grind. Um, this was my first set. As I went throughout the other 2 sets, it became much more challenging for me. So that's how I know this was an appropriate weight for me to use. You need that foot drive when you're performing these presses. Like, you really need that full body tension because we don't want to borrow it from anywhere else. We really want the chest to be the one doing the work and the arms. So for me, I chose to drive my heel into the ground where normally I would be driving my toes into the ground. That's what I normally will do during chest pressing, but I drove my heels instead, which just felt strange to me. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just preference for me at this point. I'm not a power lifter. So the way you go about it is just having that anchor point, really making sure you're squeezing those shoulder blades, you have a little bit of arch in your back, and that's going to help you as you go through that range of motion. Now, the next movement I chose to do, I performed a version of a shoulder dislocate. Now, what I'm using here is about a maybe an 8-ish pound bar. This is actually the bar from my chin up bar that's currently unassembled. It is a Rogue pull up bar, but I found myself over the last year or so with having it disassembled because we were moving, etc. It's actually I prefer using it versus a traditional dowel because I like that extra weight. It helps me. Now, the interesting thing about this particular variation is most people will take a dowel, they'll bring it up over their head, they'll just go back and around and do these fast dislocates. But in this case, what I'm actually doing is I'm pulling down, I'm bending that bar, and I'm externally rotating before I press it back. And by doing that, I'm actually opening up my pec minor, I'm opening up my shoulders, I'm really getting into this stretched position, which is something that dislocates while doing can feel really good, actually isn't opening up or improving that range of motion. Now, the reason why I partner these two movements together and I superset them is because while I'm increasing my range of motion, I can then apply that to my dumbbell chest press. Because if I can get into a deeper range of motion, well, then I can get more the good stuff happening for hypertrophy. And I can also strengthen that end range of motion so I can retain it. It can be really helpful if I'm going behind myself to grab things, if I'm getting a kid who's moving all over the place. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can totally partner mobility work with your strength training work because your strength training work is only improved by the mobility work, and your strength training also improves your mobility. It's strength and flexibility partnered together for that reason. The next set of work I have a constant tension, so this would be B1. I have a constant tension seated shoulder press. Now here what I'm using are uh, double 16 kilo bells. And the cool thing about constant tension, and I'm aiming for about 8 to 10 reps here. The cool thing about constant tension is if you don't have access to a large amount of weight, in this case, the bells I have, it goes from like 16 to 20 to 24. So for me to jump up in weight and perform it, it can be uncomfortable at times. I'm actually a bigger fan of doing body weight shoulder presses. I just find it keeps my shoulders happier. But at the moment, can't really do that because I can't be in an inverted position because it would bother my foot. So this seated variation was really nice. It was a good way not to put as much pressure on my feet. Nice way to make sure I wasn't cheating because I had the bench there to really drive my back into, keep that nice tall spine. The constant tension, the biggest difference is you're under constant tension. At no point are you resting in this movement, which is something that I think a lot of people will lose sight of. So in a normal chest press, you might come down, you might press overhead, pause, you might come down, right? Depending on your range of motion. For me, I am pretty bendy, so I can get up and way back. So I like to really make sure that I'm not fully locking out when I press, because for me, a full lockout is like hyperextended. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm keeping this constant tension going. I'm not locking out at the top, and I'm not locking out at the bottom. And when I'm at the bottom, I'm not resting it on my chest, right? Ooh, fireworks. I'm not resting it on my chest. So what I'm doing is I'm letting it come up. I'm keeping that tension, and then I'm going right back up, which is why using 16 kilos in each arm for me feels really good. It becomes a challenge. You can actually see at the end of the set, I go to get that last one, and it's just not there. Um, Mind over matter. Like literally, I every set I did, I hit about the same rep number, and I could not get past that point. It was like a sticking point. I knew it'd be really ugly. So RPE of about like 8 in this case, because I was getting about 8 reps. So that's just a little bit more about constant tension and why I chose that. Now, I then did B2, or I supersetted with this shoulder extension and forward fold exercise. I really like this. I love shoulder extension, specifically after doing overhead pressing and all that chest pressing. It's a very nice motion. If you don't have a dowel or anything, you can actually take your arm behind your back and just reach forward, and you'll get the same sensation. Now, my hamstrings and my hips have been very tight because I haven't been able to walk normally for the last few days. So what I actually found was that this variation felt really good. I tried at first to take pressure off my foot, but so you'll see my knee is kind of like slightly bent after the first one, and I found that actually made it really hard, like really really hard. So I then went back to having straight legs. This position is really intense. What you actually want to think of, or what you could do if you weren't used to this, is you can go into that forward fold position, even with your hands just on your legs, whatever that looks like for you, and bend the knees, and then you can extend your legs. So bend and extend, and that actually puts you in that stretched position. Now it's pretty advanced what I'm doing here, taking that weighted bar and putting it back there to really get that extension. The more flexible you are, the harder it becomes to get into that end range of motion that you actually need to stress. You should be sore after stretching. I do know that doing this particular variation made the shoulder presses for me feel easier, feel more loose, feel more fluid. For you, it might not feel that way. But again, this is why I chose this variation. After a few sets of that, my next set was what I chose to do was a seated tricep overhead extension. And what you'll actually see in this, I chose the 16 kilo bell for this. What you'll actually see is I have the hurt foot forward, which actually makes it harder for me because I have to stabilize through those hips even more. I don't have solid ground contact. And you'll also notice that I focus really hard on having straight arms and actually lifting my chest up as that bell goes back. By doing that specific variation, I'm opening up my T-spine and getting a wicked stretch, and also getting that stretched position in the tricep. By doing that and getting that stretched position, we're actually going to be developing more tricep strength, hypertrophy, whatever you want to call it, and getting into that end range. So it's actually a double whammy. A lot of people, what they'll do for a tricep overhead extension, and there's a time and a place for partial reps, right? There's actually been research showing that that is great for muscle gain. But what I want is I want that stretched position pause, and then I want to come all the way up and get that full extension. You could do the same thing with a cable too. Get that pause, come up, right? You get that, but you really want to find that stretched position. And I find doing seated tricep extensions is amazing. You could also do this on the ground for more of like a Zercher position. So you have your legs straight out in front of you, which is really fun and a big challenge. It was brutal because it was the last exercise of the day, or last 2 exercises. You'll see the superset in a second. The reps are higher. That's just what it is. As you go, Reps are lower because the weight is harder, more challenging exercise. As you go through getting closer to single joint movements, the reps are higher. So that's how we look at that. And then this was supersetted with what normally would be like a standing front raise. What I actually find is this is really stressful on the joint, having the thumbs faced up. So what I really like to do is I like to come up and scoop and rotate and have a slight bend. This rotation feels really good. Now you can't, I personally wouldn't do it with a lot of weight because again, it's a single joint movement. The whole point of it is we're going to be doing higher reps here, and I want to keep form smooth. Now another wrinkle in this plan was the fact that my foot is hurt, so I can't do it standing. So actually doing it from a seated position, coming back and getting that stretch is really challenging, and bringing it up is really challenging. As you come up, you want to have that slight bend in the elbow versus being here. Slight bend so I can really squeeze my shoulder up, get that recruitment of the front of my shoulder. And that was it. I was going for about 15 to 20 reps there. So it was a lot by even like the second set. So that's a little bit more about what this training looked like, why I was doing the training, just to develop upper body strength, focus on mobility. Now this is like honestly the way I would program for my clients, I program for myself. It's just important that I'm emphasizing the mobility of what I am doing and I'm able to blend it all together. This session took like 45 minutes. It wasn't that long. It wasn't that many exercises. That's the whole point of training. You don't need to be spending 2 hours doing a workout. You don't need to be going to the gym 6 days a week. Like I train upper body push, upper body pull, and a single lower body day. And I have great results from that because I'm able to be consistent with it. And on those other days that I'm not training, I'm just active. Right now, things look different because I am currently dealing with this injury. But for the most part, the most important thing you want to keep in the back of your mind is why you're doing, what you're doing, and how is it helping you day to day. My goal and my clients' goals are to be strong, are to be mobile, and to just have more energy and get the most out of life. I'm not a bodybuilder. I am not an extreme endurance athlete. I am just someone who is looking to get the most out of life. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you go through training. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give a thumbs up if you found this helpful, and leave a comment below if you'd like to see me do more breakdowns of the workouts that I'm doing. If you find it particularly helpful, if there's something you're curious about, maybe I'll try to do these every couple weeks because believe it or not, I follow the same program for weeks at a time because that's the best way to see results and to have progressive overload. Without further ado, remember, you're one day away from getting back on track and one day away from realizing how fucking amazing you are.